Hello, on the BRICS Africa Channel. Today we're exploring an evolving global dynamic that holds immense potential for Africa's economic and political landscape, and that's the growing influence of BRICS. Now, the BRICS bloc has become an increasingly influential force in global governance, especially as it now represents over 37% of the world's GDP, surpassing traditional Western alliances like the G7. An important question, though, is how African nations can strategically position themselves within this alliance, leveraging the bloc as a powerful platform for sustainable development and economic resilience. Well, to share his thoughts on this, I spoke to Kwame Senou, who's the executive director at THOP, and that's a strategic advisory firm based in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Kwame, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the BRICS Africa Channel. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's my pleasure.
Kwame, perhaps we can start with this question. It interests me quite a bit. How does the BRICS bloc influence in Africa differ from traditional Western partnerships?
I think the good question to ask is, how is Africa perceived by the world generally? The world is currently dominated by the West, essentially, and this position has always been framing international relations in a position of dominant powers and powers under influence like Africa. So whenever Africa was engaging in international relations, it was from a position of submission. What the BRICS have achieved is to give a seat of Africa, a seat to Africa in a base of equality, and that's what Africa has always been asking for. When you look at the setting of the last conference, President Ramaphosa was at the forefront, like Africa deserved to be.
Okay, so the question then, I suppose, might be, are there specific areas maybe that BRICS countries offer more advantageous partnerships with Africa?
When the partnership is equal and thought to be mutually beneficial, it can only lead to more advance. Let's look at the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Those five countries that founded the BRICS and the new members all have specific economic, diplomatic, military, intellectual capabilities that Africa can benefit from. Whether it is China and its advanced industry, whether it is Russia with its military power and its military industrial complex that may help produce cheaper equipment, whether it is Brazil with its agriculture experience and export capacity when Africa is challenged into feeding its children. So I see really that the key fundamental is this approach of being mutually beneficial, being on a foot of equality, which allow everybody to take to seize opportunity. The BRICS also, in terms of advantage, doesn't come with the lawfare we observe when we deal with other partners where regulations are put in place to discourage export from Africa or make them rather difficult. China has, for instance, recently announced that export from some of African countries would be free from any tariff in accessing the China market, which is the second consumer market in the world, we have to say. So that is really the key. But we shouldn't look we shouldn't look at this whole conversation in a perspective of alternative. It's not BRICS or West. It is Africa is open to everybody. Like President Kwame Nkrumah said, we're not looking east or west, we're facing forward. And what's forward for us African is employment for our people. It can be through industrialization achieved with China. It is feeding our people through partnership in agriculture with Brazil, Ethiopia, and any other new member. It is also solving the problem of security with all partners that are willing to do that. The BRICS is a wake-up call to any partner that Africa wants to be dealt with as what it is, a big continent.
I'm glad that you said that it's not either or, because the reality, though, is pressure is coming to bear from these superpowers, whether from the East or the West, perhaps to pick a side. And I just wonder how Africa can balance these pressures or perhaps encouragements. Um, the BRICS and also the existing trade partnerships with the West, the G7, for example.
Africa has already its own blueprint, which is the AFCFTA, the Continental Free Trade Agreement. To make it happen, we need investment from everywhere: the West, the East, the North, the South. Even the polar bear are welcome to invest in Africa, if I may for this joke. The key point is nobody can pressure us into doing what we don't want because we see the pressure locally. We have this young population that keep growing. I've read yesterday that we need to create 15 million jobs every year. That is the real pressure African leaders have. It is not the pressure of Washington or London or Paris or Beijing or Moscow. It is the domestic pressure. And we see already that manifesting in the form of violence, instability, political crisis. The real pressure comes from within. And what is the solution is solving the social demand: education, healthcare, food, employment, and quality of life. That is what the African has been looking for, and every partner that can do it is welcome. And it makes business sense. There is money to be made in Africa with the growing population. So I think there's even enough space for any bloc to fit in. It's not a matter of picking side.
What opportunities do you think BRICS offers African governments when it comes to issues like governance and policy making?
In the international stage, what you need is to have agency. And this agency comes from also your network of ally and partners. For instance, we have in the BRICS some of the veto power in the UN Security Council uh, uh, who would decide if Africa should have one or two seats permanent in the future. What also it helps is that Africa can now leverage the opportunity brought by the BRICS to in the negotiation it has with the West. If you are not selling me a Western technology, I might find it from China or Russia. That helps to balance the relationship and bring some sort of new equilibrium that will move forward the relationship. I mentioned when we started that each of the BRICS members have their strengths, and there are also a opportunity for learning, because what the African government are facing is a challenge of transforming their economies. It has happened in some of the country. There is so many learning. The last but not least is for me the intellectual part. Africa has mainly been seeing the world through the lenses of its former colonial masters because they shaped the education. With the BRICS and more openness to China, thinking more people studying in China, for instance, it's an opportunity to learn another culture, another way of thinking things, which may not be the Protestant Western way of doing things. And it's not an indictment of this way of doing things. It's just to have multiple perspectives in our collective humanity to find a way forward for Africa.
You mentioned the Continental Free Trade Area earlier, and I just wonder how African countries perhaps can leverage the BRICS setup to help us with our African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
The Continental Free Trade Agreement is clear. It is to create the single largest market in the world. To do that, we have to have things that we trade with. To do that, we have to have the infrastructure that support trade. So the advantage of the BRICS is really into leveraging the past experiences. For instance, in the Southeast Asia region, in Brazil, in India, especially India, that is also growing fast at the moment, to apply it locally, building on what is the what is the advantage of each market. South Africa, I like to usually point that to my South African friend. South Africa is a very good market, for instance, for meat. Africa has been importing meat. There is an opportunity to leverage from what the other BRICS members are doing in food to make South Africa a food power that exports food for the rest of the continent. Why DRC would not export electricity? And Benin, for instance, tried to move in the fabric sector using cotton to create fabric locally. So basically, it is the learning, it is the additional investment that doesn't always come with the condition of the West. You know, always this requirement of human rights that are not always clear to access of their, I would say, their fairness in simple terms. It's that. So in a nutshell, it's investment, learning, and opportunities. Because we can deal within Africa, but we have to also export outside Africa to bring in hard currencies.
Do you think that it makes sense to have more African nations in BRICS, at least having one large economy from each of the blocs, whether it's SADC, ECOWAS, or East Africa Community? At the moment, there's only 3 countries in the BRICS Plus grouping. I wonder if that's enough African representation within BRICS.
Africa representation within BRICS is like any Africa representation in international institution. We have to make it strong. According to the African Union, there is 55 states recognized on the continent. That means we need to do more. We need to carry our weight, like it will be said in French. We need to really show that. So we need more people. We need also more perspective. The challenges might be similar, but there are some regional differences that having more African countries in BRICS can bring into perspective when conversation is happening. For instance, having a West African nation can highlight the issue the West African states are facing, because we have regional blocs like ECOWAS where there is a conversation among leaders. I do find it a very valid idea to move BRICS forward. And again, it is not either or, it's not a choice between the West and BRICS. It's having multiple platforms for Africa to exercise its agency on global stage.
We've been talking mostly about the advantages and the positives of the BRICS and Africa. There must be some challenges, though, that we probably need to look at and maybe even address.
Yes, definitely. When you have a collective like BRICS, where we have to be honest, not everything is rosy within the BRICS. We have the same issues with any international organization. China and India are geopolitical power that have their own challenges. Russia and his new stance in the world comes with his issue. And you also mentioned the reaction of the West. Again, Africa has to be conscious of its strength in the world, its weaknesses, and know how to play its part in the advancement of our collective humanity. Some of the challenge with the BRICS is this heteroclite gathering of country might be a challenge to form a common position. I want to see in that challenge the opportunity of an additional platform for Africa to engage with other countries bilaterally. Like BRICS offer an opportunity for African countries to deepen their relationship with any of the member. And that is where the advantage is. But the bloc itself lack for now the institutional apparatus to really weigh on things, although it serves as a tool to change the narrative on global stage that everything has to be only one-sided in favor of the West.
Kwame, perhaps as a final thought, what do you think can be done immediately that might have a significant impact when it comes to Africa and BRICS?
I think when it comes to Africa and BRICS, we have just to refer to what the African wants. They want employment, they want health, they want education. We can definitely use the BRICS platform to talk to China. We don't want to export our mineral raw anymore. We want to transform them locally. Come and invest in our economy so that we can transform those mineral in Africa. That can be a huge game changer for Africa to process. Look at DRC. If we can start processing some of the mineral in Zambia, in DRC, in Angola, in even in West Africa, there's some significant thing. We would create jobs and start having some relief in Africa. That's where BRICS would make sense. BRICS would only make sense for Africa if it is not another talk shop, but rather an economic powerhouse to achieve what the Africans have always been asking for, which are their social demand: education, employment, entrepreneurship, healthcare. And that is only through one way: mass industrialization of the African economic sector. And this, we stop this mine to port journey which we have been stuck into since the 1400s. We need to transform locally. They have the industry in China. They have the industry in India. They have the industry in Russia. Even when you look at the food industry, Brazil is a powerhouse. I'm talking about the original members, but you can look at also the new members and see all their strength. They need to bring it. That is when it makes sense. And I want to use this opportunity to call on the African president to really drive this agenda. We don't need a talk shop. We don't need to use BRICS as a tool against the West and all that. It's not the conversation. The conversation is that when you have 3/4 of African below the age of 35, you should be thinking about how to keep them busy so that they are far away from violence, how to feed them properly so that they are in good health and they create economic value, and how you can, educate them so that the human skill is useful again for our collective humanity.
Kwame Senou, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on the BRICS Africa channel.
Thank you very much, Peter. It was really a great pleasure to talk about this key question on the global stage at the moment.